Hi everyone, thank you for coming to the fifth of the INSEAD Blockchain and Fintech series installment with Fintech associations around the world. Today we have Corinne Ackerman, the Startup Innovation Hub for InsurTech Hub Munich, that will share with us the landscape of InsurTech for Germany and how digital is transforming insurance. Corinne, the stage is all yours.
Well, thank you for the intro, Christian. It's great to have actually quite a small group today so we can have an in-depth discussion. I'm happy to present a little bit more about the InsurTech Hub itself and as well the German and DACH landscape in the InsurTech Hub field or InsurTech field, apologies. If there are any questions from you guys or if you want to jump in and just make a comment, then please feel free to do so. This really shouldn't be a frontal presentation, but more of a discussion. And I'm really happy to get to know you guys. A little bit more about me. So my background is actually in international relations and public international law, and I studied in Spain, France, and in the UK. In my time at university, I actually founded my own startup, which is part of the reason why I actually work at the InsurTech Hub now. So I really come from a founder's background and really understand the companies that I work with. Even if it was a little bit more HR focused and social entrepreneurship and really a B2C model, which is not always the type of company that we currently work with. My role at the InsurTech Hub, I focus on a lot of thought leadership, for example, trends, presentations. I'm responsible for the startups here at the InsurTech Hub. That means early stage, late stage, from scouting, the different formats that we offer, as well as the alumni and community building. And I also work with the universities and the development on that side. So that can be, a university from the US visiting that would like to know a little bit more about the landscape, you guys, or projects with different universities, research projects, masters, theses, and such. Now, the InsurTech Hub is located, obviously, in Germany. We are designated by the federal government as the official InsurTech Hub in Germany. As some of you might know, Germany does not have one city for business, like maybe in the UK or in France, where you have London and Paris really as the key parts of the economy. Here in Germany, we really have pushed all of our different industries in different cities. So if you're looking for a logistics city, then you would go to Hamburg. Or if you want to talk about finance, then Frankfurt is probably your first bet. And that's why Munich is actually very strongly focused on insurance and mobility. Within the state of Bavaria, we have over 100,000 employees working in direct insurance. And then obviously, if you go into the secondary market with, what's the English word for it? Different secondary industries related to insurance, then that number obviously becomes much, much higher. And so obviously, as the capital of insurance in Germany, that's why we were designated as the official InsurTech Hub from the federal ministry. A little background, we were founded in 2015 by 12 insurance companies. Now these are international players like Allianz, Munich Re, and Generali, down to kind of the regional Bavarian players who realized that on the horizon we had Google, Tesla, Amazon that were actually looking at the insurance market and could actually be one day direct competitors. And so obviously to avoid this, they decided, you know what, why don't we try and pool some of our resources and build a hub so that we can actually push this industry forward, the traditional industry that we have, and adjust it to make sure that, in 20 years, we still exist. Because at the end of the day, if Allianz or Generali has 1% more or 1% less in competitive market share, that's not going to make the difference. The market will be disrupted by a big tech player, and that could really change the landscape completely. Now, the way that we're organized is we are, the place, the forum for all of the different stakeholders to come and exchange on the topic of insurance innovation. So that's investors, the government, universities, obviously startups and insurance companies, but also cross-industry corporates. And I'll show you a couple of examples in a second. Our main mission is first to foster cooperation, not only between corporate and startup, but also between universities and corporates, startups and investors, as well as government, because we would like to collectively push that industry forward. We also want collective know-how. So these are the best practices to build a roadmap to digitization. We work very strongly with cross-industry corporates and startups because we believe the best ideas come from outside and that the insurance companies can learn a lot. And ultimately, that means a general culture change to develop an organization through approachable innovation tactics. Now, if we look at kind of the people that we work for, we are a non-for-profit association. So these are the people that fund us, and these are the organizations that we essentially work for who pay annual membership fees. You'll see some familiar logos here that are more international players. We also have some that are active in other markets than Germany, because even though we want Munich to be the epicenter of digital insurance, that doesn't mean that we're limited to the German language or the German region. That's why you'll see Markel as one of the larger US insurance companies focused on property casualty, and Dai-ichi Life, one of the bigger life insurers in Japan, the Japan market, as well as Southeast Asia. You'll also see a couple of non-insurance corporate partners. A lot of people ask me, why is PwC a part of it, or why Roche? Now, these are companies that have a vested strategic interest in seeing this industry digitize and having a say in it. And so it's very important for them to also be a part of that hub. Now, institutionally, we have partnerships from, Plug and Play to the Dutch Association of Insurance Companies, to the government, to different innovation lobbies here in Germany. In terms of startup alumni, there are a lot of them. We have a very big network, and obviously try and support them as much as possible. A lot of different success stories, and if we had more time, I would happily go into more detail on that side. I would highly recommend, you're more than welcome to check out our webpage, where we often share the success stories that we have. And because this is really a collective network, we've also started, as of last year, bringing in investors, because we think that they also have a very important role to play in pushing that industry forward. Now, just to explain a little bit the development since we've launched in 2015. Now, in 2015, it was really just an initiative, this idea of, C-level people from 12 companies saying, yes, let's do this together. But that was kind of it. To 2016, actually having a program for startups where we had only 5 startups in the program, about 30 applications. So quite small, sitting actually right here in this room in the Werk 1 building in Munich, which is kind of a startup incubator and office space, to now where we actually run 2 programs a year. We push through 40 startups per program and always have around the 300 applications mark. And so obviously a lot has changed in the last 4 years, and we're really proud of the successes. I think the main driver was actually in 2018, actually getting a team. Before that, the insurance companies would volunteer their own resources. So 1 employee would work part-time at the hub. Now we have a full team of 6 employees, currently looking for probably 2 more that do all of these different formats. That's a quick overview of the InsurTech Hub and what we do. Are there any questions on that topic before I give you a little bit more insight into what InsurTech actually means in Germany and in DACH?
Yep, actually has a question in the chat. Like, she saw Cologne also on the map for InsurTech. Like, what's the difference between the Cologne and the Munich?
So that's a very good question. So on the map, you have, for example, 2 fintech hubs, 2 logistics hubs, and 2 InsurTech hubs. Now, the main difference between Cologne and Munich as cities is in Cologne, we have a lot of smaller players located, as well as AXA. And there was a shift, I believe in the 80s, please don't quote me on that, of insurance companies actually moving to Munich. So Cologne still plays an important role as well in the insurance industry, but of course, having the 3 largest players probably in Europe located in Munich, we're talking about Generali, Allianz, and Munich Re, definitely gives Munich a leg up in terms of market size. Any other clarifications that I can make?
So how's the, okay, I think you're gonna go into that after this on the growth of the insurance, like why the InsurTech hub in Munich is growing a lot since inception. So please.
I mean, I don't think this is something that I fully go into in the next couple of slides. I think InsurTech has become quite a buzzword in the last couple of years. Before, it was just part of Fintech. And only in the last 2-3 years has InsurTech really become a word of its own, and people really understand that differently. Now, interestingly enough, my first question is, what does actually InsurTech mean? Now, a lot of people would say, you know what, that's just neo-insurers. It's just these N26 and Revolut versions of insurance that do the same thing, but in a digital way. And I would actually argue with that quite strongly, because insurance is such an umbrella industry. You know, it has touch points with mobility, it has touch points with health, with property. There's very little that you can do in your life without involving insurance. And that's why for us, the word InsurTech means a lot more. So any startup in any of these words that you see on the screen that are related to prop tech, to health, to logistics, to even enterprise 2.0, for us would also be considered an InsurTech. Which means if I go to a conference, for example, if we go to the Web Summit in Lisbon, which is one of the biggest startup conferences in the world, about 80% of those startups are relevant for our corporate partners. And I would class as an InsurTech. And that's why I think the more awareness you build, the more that word actually means to people, and the more our hub grows, but other hubs as well. I mean, Cologne is also growing, even though, you know, we are friendly competitors. We have the Global InsurTech Alliance, which is a collection of a lot of different InsurTech hubs around the world, from Tokyo to Singapore to Connecticut. And all of them are getting a lot of success because insurance itself is a very conservative industry. And in my opinion, it is one of the industries with the largest potential for innovation that just hasn't been tapped in yet. So it means that a lot of insurance companies are realizing, you know what, maybe the internet is not a hype, and this is the moment. In terms of the market at a kind of glance, now you have a lot of information on this slide. You can see that, you know, compared from 2012 to 2018, if you look at the top left, we've had a lot of investments by insurers themselves into InsurTech companies. You know, in 2012, it was just the lonely one, and now we're looking at over 250 investments 2 years ago. Now, this information obviously needs to be updated. It really shows that there is a growth in that word and interest in this market. The same in terms of the amount of startups founded in Germany that would consider themselves to be InsurTechs. At the bottom left, so we start with pre-2010, which is like just a lonely one, peaking around 2017, which is around over, I think, 32. And obviously this information needs to be updated because 2019 and 2020 are always trickling in, and it's always very hard to keep in. Now, most of these companies are B2B companies that really want to work and collaborate with the insurance company directly. If we compare to the US, which is the largest insurance industry in the world, Germany a close second, you can see that half of the investments, or a little bit over half of the investments, currently flow to the US for InsurTech startups, compared to the 7% in Germany. This is definitely one of the larger numbers in Europe, but I have to say it needs to improve a lot. You can really see the difference, I think, just generally between European and American investment rounds being just very different numbers. And this is probably one of the main reasons why that number is quite small. I highly recommend that you look at this report by the New Players Network. They've actually mapped all of the InsurTechs in Germany and DACH on this very fancy graph. Now, unfortunately, it's still in German, but it's quite easy to translate. You can see that within tier 1, we have the traditional InsurTechs, and then in tier 2, we have the less authentic or traditional insurtechs, those that are actually working with very small parts of the value chain rather than just being considered a neo-insurer. So obviously within tier 1, we have peer-to-peer insurance companies, different contract managers that offer new or different insurance products. And then within tier 2, we're looking at chatbots, ID, predictive analytics, mobility, and digital enablers. Now, just to make that a little bit easier to look at, just because obviously this is a screenshot, this is kind of an example of what I'm talking about when I talk about InsurTech. On the right-hand side, you can see the traditional InsurTechs, GetSafe, Autonova, Element, that actually offer insurance. And then on the left-hand side, we're looking at the enablers, those that talk about a specific or tackle a very specific part of the value chain. Now, this can obviously be in product development, like the mobility startup Pilot here based out of Munich. It could be underwriting, like predictive analytics that Prewave offers through social media. Risk carriers, which we would still consider obviously as a traditional insurtech. One which is a part of the WeFox group, one of the bigger insurtechs here in Germany. We've got admin like Omnius that really try and pull out data. Different startups that work in the claims management. So for example, Fairfleet, originally an agri-tech startup that has drones that can identify any damage to crops, then switched to also building damage, so they can circle a church or a community building quite quickly compared to someone going on the roof to recognize any damage and save a lot of cost and time. And last but not least, kind of marketing and sales. For example, InstaHelp, which is based in Austria, but now active in 7 countries, which is one of the largest therapist or mental health startups, really trying to give you better access to therapy. vQuiz as an enabler. I actually don't know vQuiz, so I'd love to hear from you what they do.
Maybe come on, Corinne, you should know me. I was with you 2 years ago and I gave you my presentation. Anyway, because it's the education app where people from the sales can get their education credits because they need 15 hours training per year. Otherwise, they lose the license.
Ah, yes. Now this does sound familiar. Thank you, Thomas.
No worry. Thank you for the invitation. I think Yip anyway invited me for this, so because we met yesterday. So anyway, yeah, no, we can keep up on that. So because it would fit here on the last part, marketing and sales. It's training for the sales people. Yeah.
And I mean, this is marketing and sales. It sounds like quite a soft part of the value chain, but I mean, InstaHelp is also prevention. I think in terms of vQuiz, you could also put it in different parts, potentially also admin. So just being one part of the value chain doesn't mean that your product is niche. I think it does still give a lot of potential, especially in the way we've presented it here. Now,
and thank you, Yip, for bringing it up. Yip, thank you.
Thomas, my apologies for not remembering. Honestly, I've met so many startups that they start to phase together and the names kind of disappear in my mind.
Don't worry.
All right, so in terms of the main issues that the insurance companies are trying to tackle, the first one are, the customer side. Honestly, insurance companies are not known for being particularly good with their customers. We're having younger customers. They want digital products, but they still want it to be personal. Insurance, especially in Germany, is very, very complicated. I think we're one of the most over-insured nations in the world, along with potentially Japan. And insurance also has a bad reputation that it just never pays out when you actually want it to. And so a lot of insurance companies are focusing on building up that relationship and getting new customer acquisition, which is not particularly easy. So that's why they have collaboration with, embedded insurance like Besurance from Austria, comparison portals, we've got customer transparency that they're really trying to push on that side. Obviously, the second point is always reducing your costs. And so here they're looking at how technology can actually support them in doing that. First thing, which I think is super interesting, is something called parametric insurance. Now, this is unfortunately only applicable to agriculture at the moment, but it's essentially you as a insurance holder doesn't have to click on any claims button to say, hey, I would like some money because something didn't happen. The insurance company actually knows this on their own. So in agriculture, the insurance company knows if it hasn't rained or it has rained, and so it can pay out on a drought insurance without you actually having to claim it at the insurance company, which obviously saves a lot of back and forth and a lot of paperwork. We have a lot of predictive analytics startups that work with different insurance companies, as well as the claims and performance management that we mentioned earlier. Now, the last part obviously is efficiency. This is particularly relevant in Germany. We always try to be more efficient, especially considering how bureaucratic a lot of insurance companies are. And the larger challenges that they're trying to face are, scam, want to ramp up their cybersecurity, want to actually use the data that's not being used, not in a second. And there's just a lot of waste and inefficiency of time and resources. So that's why we're looking at a lot of collaborations within the authentication field, data extraction, as well as data backup. And as I mentioned, for me, the biggest trend is data, data, data. Insurance companies sit on a ridiculous amount of data, comparable probably to the tech giants, Facebook, Amazon, and Google. And it's their time to really shine and to really focus on how can they use that data to potentially make personalized and obviously improved products while still, tackling the issue of privacy, which in Germany is highly relevant. Another topic that is often brought up is this question of data lakes with a competition, with a neutral party, potentially pooling information to really take advantage of the amount of information that they currently have. I think that's 2 steps forward. First, I think within a company, they need to make sure that they're using the right information and each just 2 departments talking to each other. So we're really, back to basics before we start looking at data lakes. Now, before I go to the conclusion, are there any question, anything that you fully disagree with, anything that you'd like to add?
I think recently I've been seeing like a couple of investment in the German startup landscape to invest in the InsurTech that really is like replacing insurance. Where do you think is the trend going? Like, because a lot of InsurTech has been aggregators, some now is actually insurers themselves. Yeah. So what do you think is going to happen in the next couple of years? Where's the growth going to be?
So I have to say there are a couple of InsurTechs in Germany, and they are pretty strong. Most of them do not have their own insurance license. So they sell the insurance, yes, but at the end of the day, the risk carrier remains an existing company. So for example, my personal liability insurance, which in Germany is pretty much compulsory, costs between €2.50 and €5 a month. I have mine with GetSafe, one of these rising stars in InsurTech in Germany, but itself is actually backed by Munich Re. So that's kind of the standard way to go. In fact, in Germany, it's very hard to acquire an insurance license, like a new one. It's similar to banks, almost easier to take over a license from an existing company for a new business. So the regulations are just ridiculous. I have to say Germany is one of the highest regulated markets in terms of insurance. So it's very, very complicated for insurance companies to come in. The BaFin is very, very strict. Unfortunately, I've only been in Germany for 3 years, so I'm not the biggest expert on this topic. But I really think that InsurTechs are wasting time and resources trying to deal with BaFin when they could have success other ways. So I don't think that's the future. In terms of the small niche startups that are really focusing on the value chain, a lot of them have huge impact. I can only recommend everyone looking at Next. Next was a startup in our first program, actually, back in 2016, and they're now one of the biggest and one of the most impactful identity startups in Germany and in DACH. They have very large projects going on with a lot of insurance companies, but obviously also a lot of other industries, and are helping insurance companies also during Corona to really ramp up their digital offerings. And just in terms of trust, a lot of people want to stay with the brands that they know, especially when it comes to such an important product where you don't want to stand there in 5 years with a company that's essentially bankrupt and that won't pay out your life insurance or something like that. So, personal disability is one thing where you can switch quite easily. Life insurance products, you want a trustworthy partner that will still be on the market in 75 years when you die. Yeah. I think it speaks more to the German culture than anything else, just because we're very risk adverse people working with a very risk adverse industry. Yeah. So as much as I would love to see this InsurTech world boom, the traditional InsurTechs will really, they have a big hurdle in front of them, and it's much easier to be one of what we consider modern InsurTechs.
That makes sense. What kind of new products are appearing because of InsurTech? You mentioned earlier on there. I think I saw cybersecurity insurance. How does that work with?
So this is quite hard. I think one of the first players to really introduce was actually a traditional insurance company. This is Hiscox. So they offered cybersecurity insurance, but it's really hard to calculate what the risks are. So a lot of companies just don't want to go there. In terms of what it says on the slide, I actually mean in terms of security for the actual insurance company. So we're talking about admin and back end security rather than as a new product. I think it's super interesting. Unfortunately, it's a black hole. There's so many things to take into consideration. And so I think the data just isn't in yet for the insurance companies to underwrite it properly. But it's obviously super interesting as well. Then I think the biggest shifts in terms of new products are really in the parametric field, and also in the mobility field with, autonomous driving and a lot of the AI powered mobility projects. And even, the scooters that have come out in the last 2 years, that's also a new insurance product that's essentially been created, because in Germany they're considered small vehicles, which means that they have to be insured essentially like a car. But it's very hard because you're insuring a different driver every hour. And so, a different product has had to be created for this new type of mobility.
What do you mean by parametric?
Parametric is this cool claims without having to actually claim any money. The money just kind of arrives. Because the insurance company has all the data more than you would. So this is unfortunately currently only available regarding to weather, but I could see parametric insurance going to potentially mobility, where the car has so many sensors that the car actually knows the damage before you do, and can inform the insurance company so that they essentially pay out without you having to write 5 pages worth of information.
Oh, that's cool. So a combination with Industry 4.0 kind of insurance.
Yeah, this is not at all on the market yet, but I can see parametric insurance going in that direction. Unfortunately, just because of the current limitations, it's really only limited to weather and drought insurance, which is unfortunately quite a niche market.
Corinne, I'd also have a question regarding your experience with all these different startups that you've screened and also that you've accompanied along their growth journey since a few years. What, in your view, are like typical assets or competences that these startups need to have to be able to thrive in the European or even German InsurTech landscape?
Hard question, Yip. I think, for me, it always comes down to this question of, do they have the sales and do they have the tech? And that's kind of this symbiotic relationship that needs to be really strong. You need to have a digital product that really works, but then you also need someone that kind of understands the industry at least a little bit, because I've been working in it for 2 years and I feel like I've only scratched the surface. You need the experience of understanding your customer, which is key in sales. I mean, I think you guys are the MBA students, you should probably know this better than I do. But on the other side, like if you don't have the right technical product, then it's just not going to work. So it's really finding the balance between those two. And obviously a lot of the startups that we support have the technical product, need help on the business side, because that's where our team and our ecosystem and our network can actually help to really ask the right questions, to open them up, and to, you know, allow startups to do the right market research. But you need obviously someone that, you know, spends a lot of time listening and taking in all of that information like a sponge.
Thanks.
You're welcome. I mean, I'm happy to also share a couple of my conclusions from you know, just generally in the market. First of all, I see a lot of cooperations going on between corporate and startup. A couple of corporates, you know, they try also to do their own projects, their own innovation in digital products. And in some regards they work, in some regards they don't. And in, you know, it's very hard to estimate whether it'll be a success when you start out. So that's why a plug and play solution with a startup, regardless of early stage or late stage, does give them a kind of a benefit in terms of time and money saving. So there's a lot of the tech outsourcing simply to startups, because also I think in a new generation, people with technical backgrounds might not actually want to work in an insurance company itself. So they'd rather found their own startup and work with the insurance company that way. And so you have a lot of strong ecosystems growing, like our hub, like the Cologne hub, to really allow that kind of networking to happen for those corporations. A huge focus for insurance companies is, you know, how to get that millennial customer, how to get that digital native, which they don't fully understand. And so getting those customers who, first of all, would want the product differently, but second of all, just don't understand why they need an insurance policy at all. That's why a lot of insurance companies are looking at more like this relationship building. Let's become a lifetime partner. Now, this is something that Generali actually presented at one of our events like a couple of weeks ago, that, you know, it's not just your grandparents that are married for life. We as an insurance company want to offer this to our customers too, that, you know, we're always there for support rather than just signing a contract and the day you actually want a claim. So they're there to help you in the prevention of diseases, in, you know, if you're going on a holiday and you have travel insurance, they'll let you know if there's a protest going on, because at the end of the day, they want to be there as a companion more than just an insurance company. And that's why a lot of them are going into that prevention field, which is huge, which brings me to the last point in terms of how can you actually reduce risk. Not particularly easy, especially because we have new risks coming on. A lot of digital solutions are a lot cheaper. So how do we provide a safer world, which ultimately means for the insurance company too, that they save money in their claims. Is there anything else that I can expand on or highlight for you guys?
Let's talk about the growth, because some of the conversation that's happening within the group is always, okay, so InsurTech is great, it's growing, but if I want to recruit in Germany for InsurTech, how do I start? Where's a good place to, you know, is there any suggestions maybe on companies that are growing recently?
Yes, I believe there's even a report of the biggest growing companies during Corona and those retracting the most. And I remember, I just saw it on LinkedIn maybe last week. I remember GetSafe being on that list. I believe Element was too. So Element is based in Berlin. GetSafe is based, I believe, in Heidelberg or in Baden-Württemberg at least, so in South Germany. I think those are the biggest. Let me just go back to this pretty slide of companies.
Is that slide coming from the report?
So no, it's not in the report itself. This is just my slide right here. So you've got Element down on the bottom right. You've got GetSafe. Autonova, I think, is kind of stagnating. Next, as cool as it is actually a very small company. I believe they're still under 10 employees and based in Hamburg. If you're looking at the Munich market, which I highly recommend because it's a beautiful city with mountains and sunshine and snow and everything, then you have companies like OCell, which is related to, they scan forests from above. It's quite a small company. It's quite early stage, based actually here in the building. We've got eBot7, which is one of the biggest success stories in Munich. This is I would say one of the best chatbots in Germany. They're a company probably growing to like 75 by the end of the year. What you can always do if you're looking at the startup scene specifically is we have an organization that's started a campaign called It Takes a City. Now in different cities in Germany, they've created kind of a poster and an overview of the entire startup ecosystem in that city. So in Munich, it will mention things like the building, Werk 1 and the startup incubation that we have here, as well as all of the innovation hubs, whether that's, the plug and play, the World Food Program Accelerator, or us, the InsurTech Hub. But then they also have all of the biggest success stories. So just an example here in Munich, one of the bigger and more successful startups is Flixbus, which no longer quite a startup, more of a scale up, also received quite a bit investment. We've got Freeletics that are constantly hiring down to kind of the smaller companies, eBot7, probably around 50 employees at the moment, OCell, 7 employees. So it kind of just shows you the entire market. I know a lot of people look to Berlin for the startup scene. What I can tell you in terms of Berlin versus Munich is Berlin is very B2C focused and very retail focused. The scene is very cool, and I'll leave it at that. Obviously, I'm slightly biased. Munich has the benefit of all the large corporates being based here. So most of the B2B startups are based in Munich, and we're getting to a point where we're pretty much on eye level with Berlin in terms of investment and ecosystem. And in terms of lifestyle costs, it's getting very close to being at eye level as well.
Really? What?
Yeah, so it's pretty cool. So, I mean, we have one of the biggest startup conferences in Germany, the Bits and Pretzels, based in Munich. Yeah, I have to say the scene here is really exploded over at least the last 4 years, and it's been a general trend upwards. We have a lot of programs from the government to really help startups get founded here. We have fantastic universities. The Technische Uni in Munich, the TUM, has insane projects coming out of it. I think even Elon Musk, when he was working with his little tunnel, I'm not sure what they're called, but this tunnel project from LA to San Fran, I think it was also a TUM prototype that won. We also have the LMU, which is one of the best universities in the country. So it helps that we have a lot of the talent already here. And then it's just a question of funneling them into startup programs. And both the TUM and the LMU have very strong entrepreneurship focuses and entrepreneurship centers.
So the drive in Munich is by the government and by the big businesses that are there. Like, is there also support for like talents who are trying to get into Munich? For people who work in the startup, how easy it is to obtain working permit for with these companies?
Oof, I think this is past my expertise, unfortunately. Yeah, I think in terms of visa, it's a bigger question. I know that we are trying to grow, and I think most people will manage to find a visa, but I cannot talk on behalf of the government.
No, no worries. So there's not, at least that means you haven't heard about like a visa program for startup talents, like what the UK is doing. Like I think UK has a digital talent program kind of thing for certain skills.
So not for visa directly, but I know that if a company wants to create a GmbH, so the official company, like LTD, in Germany or in Bavaria, then there's a lot of support from the government. And I assume that also applies to international talent. But how exactly that works, I cannot tell you. I can connect you with the right people. But yeah, I have no idea. Unfortunately, I have the benefit of European passports, so I don't have that issue.
So what's next for Munich InsurTech Hub? What are you planning? What's the team planning?
So I mean, at the moment, you know, we've really focused on InsurTech and only InsurTech, as big as that word actually is.
Of course.
And at the moment, since September, we've been in kind of a cross-industry project. This is the H+ program. And this program itself is pretty cool. It's focused only on digital health. So you can see it here all the way at the end of the timeline. So instead of having 40 companies from everything in InsurTech, where it's really, you know, 5 relevant for claims and 5 in health and 5 in mobility and a couple from cybersecurity and a couple of AR startups, it's only digital health startups, and there are 40 of them. And unfortunately, due to the pandemic, it's of course virtual, but the same 3-month program that we offer for InsurTechs, we're actually doing at the moment for digital health, which is highly relevant as a strategic topic for insurance companies. But we're only experts on the second half of that value chain of the reimbursement side. The first half, in terms of the clinics and the doctors and all of that, we're just not the experts. So we've partnered up with the medical hub in Nürnberg-Erlangen. You can see here digital health. And they're the experts. They have the innovation network and the digital network on the first half of the value chain, and we do the second. So we've actually found a really cool partnership to expand our offerings so that we're not just limited by insurance, and that we can really go into deep topics and look at other industries that are highly relevant for insurance. So I think that's our big project right now, is focus on cross-industry, focus on international players, and growing past the small, you know, village hub that might have been the case in 5 years, back in 2015, but definitely does not define us anymore in 2020.
Oh, Thomas has a question on how can a startup be a member of the community?
That's a very fair question, Thomas. Since we have very fixed startup offerings, so that's the innovation program that we offer for early to mid-stage startups, and we have the collab initiative for late stage startups, we normally take in startups through those programs. So there's the application phase, and then, you know, we'll take in those 40 companies for the innovation program. For the collab, it's like 10 to 20. And those are the startups that we have in our community. We really do try to focus on quality rather than quantity and accepting anybody. And that's why we're quite involved. For example, in the innovation program, we have quite intensive business development weeks where we do, you know, quite intensive matchmaking between corporate and startup, but we're also there in the meeting with you as a concierge and bridging the gap, moderating the meeting, sometimes translating from corporate culture to startup culture. And that's why it's not that easy to get into the hub as a startup, just because we only accept those maybe 100 startups through the different startup offerings that we currently do.
Cool. And how about with universities? I heard you guys are doing partnership with universities. Can you elaborate a little bit?
Thank you, Christian, for the question. I completely flew over that. So universities is something that's growing. Unfortunately, just because of the resources limitation, it's definitely taken a back seat, but I think it's super exciting because we want as many students as possible to consider working as startup founders. And as a backup, if they don't want to be a startup founder, then potentially, you know, as a as an employee in an insurance company or any big corporate, to think a little bit more agile and a little bit more focused on digitization and innovation. So we have different projects going on, for example, with LMU, one of the best universities in Germany. We have a project where insurance companies can actually offer up questions, research questions, and during 3 months, a group of students will work on that topic, provide up to a 50-page report for the university where they actually get ECTS credits for and grades, and present in front of our entire network of corporates the results of their findings. So this can be a simple question as to, what industry can we learn something from for our roadmap for insurance, for innovation, or it can be very specific to how the corona effects on disability insurance. So it can be quite varied in terms of the topics, and the students pick the topics themselves and in agreement with the university and the insurance companies. And we've gotten a lot of success stories out of that. And it's not only a way for the insurance companies to get access to a lot of information quite quickly, but it's also a way that we connect talent to our network. And these are formats that we're copying with different universities in different ways. Another university, we're currently starting something similar, but rather than getting questions from insurance companies, we're getting them from the traditional InsurTechs, the larger InsurTechs, for example, the Elements, the GetSafes of the world, that also have a vested interest in showing the world and the insurance industry that there is potential, and the reason why they're on the market is because of a certain topic. So whether that's the shared economy that we currently live in, or the trend towards, customers wanting more digital products, whatever it may be, to kind of prove to the big guys that the InsurTechs really have a market to work in.
Sounds good. Okay, it's almost 10 now. The last question before we go, which probably you get asked this on every single thing that you do. How has COVID been impacting the InsurTechs in Munich?
Interesting question. Very valid. I think I don't think I've been asked that directly too often. Actually, it's been quite successful. And it's almost a shame to say that it's taken a pandemic and a crisis to get to this point. But a lot of insurance companies have finally woken up and realized that digital is probably the right way to go. And it's really pushed them in a very positive way. So we've got, for example, eBot7, a startup that I mentioned earlier, the chatbot startup here in Munich, and an alumni of our program. They've been completely underwater since the beginning of Corona because it is such a priority for customer support to continue, but they're just so underwater because customers are confused. And so that's really been a priority for a lot of companies. Next, the identity startup, same thing. So overall, it's been quite positive for those that have products that really can help insurance companies either streamline their product or streamline their customer service offerings, because it's just not possible in traditional ways. I'm also proud to say a lot of insurance companies are more open to doing video calls, which is fantastic news because it means that I can introduce more international startups that maybe can't afford a flight to Munich or to Germany just for a meeting. And so this also opens a lot of doors for potential collaboration.
Sounds good.
Thank you so much, Christian, for your time. If there are any other questions, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. It's not particularly hard to find someone with a half French, half German name. I don't believe there are too many. I'm happy to chat if you guys have any follow-up questions. And
absolutely
in your recruiting in the beginning of the year.
Thank you very much, Corinne. Thank you for your time. Thanks everyone for dialing in.